Welcome to the Writer's Block, an ongoing web series where we discuss writing tips, tricks for authors, primarily for Fordham University students, but really for writers anywhere. And this week we're finishing off our three-part series where we talk about 5 things that we wished we knew during our undergraduate careers. So far you've heard from Peter and from Ellis, and both of them went to private universities. I actually had a very different experience in undergrad. I went to a public university on scholarship, and I was the first in my family to really kind of go to university. We're the first generation of my family to go to university. Also an immigrant, so it wasn't really a system that I knew particularly well. But I went to the University of Utah, so Peter and I are going to be chatting about that today. So Peter, feel free to ask away questions.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just frame this with it. It's really great that you're bringing your perspective because I know, of course, that not every student can relate to going to the private university. So just getting a plurality of viewpoints here would be brilliant. Let's dive on in here. The first thing that you wish you had known when you were an undergrad.
So for me, this really is that college is on your own terms. And this isn't something that you necessarily get entirely at a private university. What I've noticed at Fordham is that there's a lot of hand holding. There's a lot of people who, are always there to watch you and make sure you don't fall. But really, the core of college is what you want to get out of it. And so when I first went to the University of Utah, I kind of just figured it was like a lot like high school. And I had a lot of ideas from the media, from the way college had been presented in books and things like that, things that I should care about that I didn't particularly care about. Frats, things like that meant nothing to me, but are a big deal sometimes in public universities and private universities. And I had to take some time to realize that these things were kind of a waste of my time. I wasn't passionate about them, and they were pulling me away from things like poetry readings or playing with a band on campus, stuff like that actually mattered to me. I didn't care for clubs whatsoever. I didn't care for any of the extracurriculars or football games and things like that. For me, college on my terms meant taking a history of rock and roll class and starting a shitty band with the members from that class. And that became, a huge project that I ran for 4 years. So that's my first kind of takeaway is that it's on your own terms. Even if you're feeling pressure from other people, you got to realize that college is your pursuit, and that's the core of it.
That's a great point. It sort of is, yeah, like you curate your own college experience, what things you choose to go to, what things you don't choose to go to. And I definitely agree with you. Like looking back at the undergraduate experience, like all of the pressures, the external pressures, matter less and less the further
Mhm.
you get away. You know, who wants you to take what, go to this thing. No one remembers that. You're going to remember what you were passionate about and what you made time for.
Absolutely. And that goes for your major as well. I initially went in as a classical guitar student, and then I switched to a biology student, thinking that I was going to be a doctor. And it took me a long time to realize what I really was doing was taking all these electives in English, and then I switched over to an English degree and I graduated on time. And if I had treated this from the get go as do it on your own terms, I probably would have spent a lot more time just in the English degree. Though, there are benefits to kind of hopping around anyway and testing out things so that you never regret not doing them.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And that really
Um,
does
uh,
segue into, it kind of segues into my second point, which is the first job that you have in college is finding out what you want and kind of distinguishing that from what you think you want. And the key thing here is, for me, it was I thought that I wanted to be this kind of like, oh, I'll be a doctor or I'll be a musician and like, have these kind of worlds around it. And then as I continued getting on and further, and I started thinking about like the actual life that I wanted ahead of me, I was like, no, I actually would rather be a teacher. I'd rather be sort of a leader to other people. And so figuring out that that was what I wanted, it didn't occur to me until my junior year of college. And really, had I done that a bit earlier, it would have put me in a better position to figure out my steps after that.
hmm. Let me ask you a follow-up question about that
Sure.
because that's really interesting. So you say you went from thinking you wanted to be a musician to being a doctor, and it sounds like after that you not only thought that you wanted to be a teacher, but you sort of thought like about what the roles involved, right? When you're a teacher, there's leadership, there's obviously writing, there's obviously sort of organizing meetings.
Hmm.
Did you go from thinking about like label, like I want to be a musician or I want to be a doctor, to thinking a little bit more holistically about like what you wanted to do rather than what you wanted to be?
I mean, that's a large part of it. I think a lot of people put a lot of emphasis on, oh, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a doctor, without thinking about the lifestyle involved. And for me, the big call of being a teacher is the lifestyle involved. I love being on campus. I love working with students. I love being a student and learning from other people. And so that was the number one attraction for me. And more so than like some revelation that I wanted to be a professor was the idea that I wanted this to be my life. So,
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. Yeah, where do you want to be? Do you want to have a campus
yeah,
lifestyle, office lifestyle? Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
It kind of actually
Really?
rolls into point number three, if I can roll along. And this is kind of a painful one for a lot of people in college, and that is you're not going to belong to all groups. Now, you are going to find like groups that you do belong to, but some places you're not going to belong, and that can be a blessing and a curse. You know, I wouldn't fit in with a certain group of students at my university, and this is more true for like a public university where you've got 15,000 students and people kind of click up based off of interest. But this also applies to being an immigrant and not necessarily knowing what was going on in a university. Um, having worked full time during it, not necessarily getting in with the same crowd of people who are just kind of there through familial wealth and stuff. And so there are cases where you're not going to belong. And while that doesn't necessarily feel great, it actually is a good thing because it helps you figure out the people that you do want to be around, that do accept you. And if you don't feel like you don't belong at a university, that only kind of applies during your undergrad years and not at all during graduate school years when everyone's much more of a professional and people are, this is their job and their life that they've chosen and they're working on it. And it's less of a like a hangout and social group and more of a this is our career path. So if that ever comes across you, it can be kind of painful, but it's a blessing and a curse.
That's an interesting point, and it seems to harken back to your first point that like don't let external pressures so much determine what you do, right? You're very much the author of your own college experience.
Hmm.
Yeah, well put.
Yeah. And two last points. So number four, and this is I'll probably get some flack from Fordham for this, and that is an undergraduate degree from any school is an undergraduate degree, so long as that school is accredited. So if a big fancy name of a university doesn't matter to you, then it doesn't matter to you. There are careers where it matters, there are careers where it doesn't matter. So one of the takeaways that a lot of people in the country in general kind of get to when they start getting to graduate school is that it doesn't really matter where you did your undergrad. Because undergraduate degree anywhere is to the same level. Now, professional networks, they matter. One-on-one teaching time, that matters and stuff like that. But I like to point out to a lot of my undergrads that majority of astronauts went to community college. Why? Because it was close to the military base when they were serving, or they were getting an engineering or science degree, and the science doesn't change based off of you being at a private university or a public university. So there are cases to be made for these kind of things. It's a little bit different in philosophy, English, and the humanities in general, where connections and stuff matter more. I probably would have had a different time in an English major had I gone to an Ivy or something. But I really enjoyed my experience hopping around between things and sort of like the lack of structure that I had at the University of Utah. Um, so yeah, in general, it doesn't necessarily matter so much where you do your undergrad as the attitude that you bring to it.
Yeah, that's a really important reminder. I've had similar conversations with people who place emphasis perhaps on it can matter where you go to graduate school, right? So
Absolutely,
sometimes,
that's a different matter
but
entirely.
yeah, and so if you're saving money for, like if there's money to go to one of them, channel it towards grad school, not to
Yeah.
undergrad. yeah, and all of the cliches about the further you get away from college, the less people ask you about it or it matters are true.
It's very much like high
Yeah,
school
I
in
went.
that regard. I will
Yeah,
say this.
exactly. It fades. Oh no, sorry, please.
I will say this. When I went to the University of Utah, I was working full time and supporting my family, like my mom and stuff. I was during the 2008 housing crisis and all of that. And so, had I been far away or had I been paying a lot in tuition, it would have put me in a different position and I wouldn't have been able to help out my family nearly as much. So, it's kind of like find the right school for what you're looking for, and the kind of life that you have around you at the time. There may not necessarily be a great answer, and maybe the answer is to go to a school that is less prestigious in the short term, but plan to apply to a graduate school later on that's more so. So yeah.
I guess a final note to add, sorry, before your fifth point is that I know another like cheat code way of doing
Mhm.
this, right? Is of course you get into a school that you like, you spend the first 2 or 3 years there, do really well, and then of course you transfer to your dream school for the last year because it only matters what stage do you walk across to get that degree.
Absolutely. And I know you and I both went to NYU for our masters. That's something that NYU offers a lot of New York State students. Do your 2 years at a public university and then do the last two at NYU. My
Yep.
last point, and this brings us finally back to the writing center, is you need to work on your writing. This is the only point in your life, undergrad, where someone is being paid specifically to help you with your writing. And I know this sounds really, really silly, but when you're writing an application for graduate school or you're writing a cover letter, you're not going to get someone to sit there and give you really great feedback who also has a degree in writing. So, one of the things I wish I had taken advantage of more was my writing center back at the University of Utah, or my professors, and just going to office hours and soliciting more time from them. Um, just because, really, unless you are going to be a writing instructor or you're going to be, a top level author and have an editor, undergrad is the only time you're going to have someone who's being paid to work with you on your writing. So take advantage of that.
That is a useful reminder. I have two codas to add, if you don't mind. One is something that I always tell some of my students is that in New York City, if you want someone to help you one on one with your writing, sit down with you and really edit it at a sentence level, if you're not in a university, that might cost you, 50, $75 an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
At Fordham, it's free, right? If you can go to the writing center. And then two, it's a sad reality perhaps, but like if you're going to Fordham and then you're going into a professional white collar job, you're basically
Mm-hmm.
just going to send emails all day every day, right? You're just going to write. That's going to be the majority of your life, and so
Yeah.
you want to master it well early on to make it easy.
Yeah, the sooner you get used to writing well or like build up those skills, the more it just kind of snowballs in your life. Are you applying for law schools? Well, it's going to help you with the application. It's going to help you with the LSAT. It's going to help you with, all of these steps that we have that sort of like gate people from things, all the hoops that you have to jump through. Every one of those involves writing to some degree. So the sooner
Amen.
you get good at it, the sooner you start to succeed in other aspects. All right. Any last questions, Peter? Otherwise, I'll wrap it on up.
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, thanks so much to everyone for listening through our 3 different stories about our undergrads and our 5 points of stuff to remember or things that we wish we knew. And with that, I'm just going to wish everyone a lovely, lovely week. We'll probably have a video out next week for Thanksgiving. So take care, everyone.
Excellent. See you.